What's up? How you doing? It's Jared. It's a Benchmade 87 balisong, and it's taken me quite a while to become comfortable with actually talking about this knife. I just didn't have a good enough impression that I felt like I wanted to put it online. And the reason being is it's a strange knife. This is the most controllable balisong that I have, right? It does things in ways that other knives just don't, because the handles are decently heavy. There's a decent amount of weight in the handles. It does have a major blade bias in the actual design itself, but when I am flipping this thing, you see that I have to give a decent amount of actual momentum to get it to go around, because the handles are decently heavy, but it's on ball bearings, and so once it has that motion, it doesn't want to stop. It doesn't want to slow down. It wants to keep going, right? Well, that was me screwing it up. But with that, I have the ability to stop it, right? Before I actually come to, I actually have the ability to stop it in motion. You can see that there. Normally, I wouldn't be able to do that with a knife, and it's necessary with this. I actually had to learn how to control this knife more because of that blade bias. It does want to come around when you're actually coming in. If I'm coming in to flip around, do a rollover actually onto the bite handle, I have to do more of a wrist pass with this knife than any other knife. It feels like I actually have to throw this thing down if I'm flipping quickly, and it's because the momentum of the blade doesn't want to stop. It just wants to continue. And I've cut myself with this knife probably more than I've cut myself with any other single balisong. And the reason being is that it keeps coming around, but I've never cut myself badly. I've never actually hurt myself with this knife. It's all just little tiny nicks and little tiny dings that I keep getting with this. And it doesn't, well, it took me a while to actually learn how to do basic openings with this. Even something as simple as dropping it into a dagger grip, something like that. You're actually dropping it into an ice pick grip. I think that's what that's called. When I do that, when I actually put it down and throw it downward, the blade wants to carry up. And I've actually caught myself just once, but it was good enough to let me know. And I caught myself right there, just like that, because I flipped the knife up, I dropped it down, and that blade came up and just caught me a little bit. And it actually stuck in me and stalled out a little bit. I was like, oh shit, what just happened? And so even something as basic as that, or a figure eight, it takes me more to there's more thought going into it. There's more thought actually going in to the flipping, even in something as simple as, that horizontal right there, because the blade doesn't want to move immediately. And I haven't cut myself doing this, but I found that in a horizontal like that, if I'm doing a horizontal opening, I do have to actually flick it out. Because if I just rely on the fall, it's not fast enough, and I'll actually bring my hand in, and I can get my hand in to that little area there, right? This is all just me being not the best flipper. If you're a good flipper, most of what I'm saying right now isn't going to come into play. I'm just trying to describe the physicality of the way that this thing actually feels in my hand. And so it's got some interesting aspects to it, and I had to relearn how to flip this knife. Honestly, I did. But with that, I love it. I love the way that it feels because it is so controllable. I can stop it in mid-motion. I can just see. And that's something as well. Once I start speeding up and actually start trying to go faster with this, I'm going to mess up. I haven't ever messed up and actually hurt myself badly, but I'm going to mess it up. You see that there? I can stop that there, swing around and get a wrist pass. But that's not intuitive. It's not the same motion that I'm doing with all of my other knives. And even the differences in those knives, I mean, I've got 2 Benchmade 51s and a 32, so I don't have a whole lot of variance. I've got others as well, but there's a whole lot of variance in the knives that I have, but they all relatively flip the same. There's a lot of similarity in them, and this thing here just does not have that similarity. It just feels different. And it is, whoop. That was an interesting one there, but it is fun. It's a whole lot of fun because it's just feels more lively. You know, it feels like there's like a soul to it. I don't know. So I'm going to go down onto the table and get into more of the actual knife itself. Aside from the flipping, my favorite thing about this knife is the finish on it. I love that bead blasted titanium finish. It's kind of got like a sparkliness to it. If you get it in the sunlight, it sparkles a little bit, and it just feels excellent in the hand. It does ding up decently easy. You can see all the edges and corners here and everything are a little bit beat up, and the latch and all of that, but it just feels so good and it sounds excellent. I don't know if you can hear that, but the way that it sounds and the clank that it's got, it's definitely an excellent knife. It's not perfect. There's some things about this that just, you know, I've heard people complain about bounce, and it's never actually come into a major negative with my style of flipping, but I know for a fact that people will not like the way that this knife bounces, because these handles, I don't know if you can actually get this to come in, but you can see the way that it bounces. There's a lot of bounce here, and so in certain manipulations it does bounce, and I have to kind of catch it. I don't know how much that's actually going to come into play with the, you know, a lot of heavy flipping, but it does want to bounce, and I think it's just the way that these tang pins are set up, because they're such a heavy recess in this actual titanium itself. It's titanium on steel tang pins. It's just going to inherently have that bounce to it because of the spring in these handles themselves, and the way that this handle is designed. There isn't a decent amount of spring to these actual handles there. You can see me squeezing them together, and so I think that's what actually attributes to it bouncing like that. The latch itself was not, honestly, I'm gonna say it, the latch I don't think was ready for game time. It's not bad, but I've heard there's a lot of problems with people on the forums. I've heard people having issues with it not working. Mine doesn't want to work perfectly all of the time. I had some problems with it out of the box, but you can see that there, it just, sometimes I can squeeze it and it's in the middle. You can see that there, and I have to work it. It's not, you see that? And that happens all of the time. What I've done is lubed it up. I've loosened it basically to where this section here was actually Loctited. If you saw, this knife wasn't Loctited from the factory. This was actually Loctited, but I loosened it up. I broke that Loctite. I've loosened it up as much as I feel comfortable with, and then I've actually stuck a whole crap load of blue lube in there, and you can see that there. It does want to spring up if I hit it, but I can bend it over and just put it there, and it'll stay there. And it's never done that during flipping. I've never actually had a problem with it staying or getting in the way, actually contacting the handle like this. I don't think that's ever happened. In fact, let's check. If that would have happened, there'd be a mark there. So I'm pretty sure that doesn't look like that's ever actually come into contact. I don't think that's ever actually come into contact there, because it would be marking on that titanium if it had. And so it's never been a major problem, but it's not perfect. It's got some issues with it, and it's not just my knife. I've heard several problems with this latch. And so I just don't think that was quite ready for game time. But at the same time, it's so cool. The way that it actually works. I love latching this knife closed, because it just snaps in there. Watch this. Snap, and it is locked in there. It is solid. I mean, it just snaps in because of the way that little hook is actually done. This little latch, you've got a little bit of lever coming out from the actual tang itself. I don't know what to call that pin there, the latch pin itself. And so when you put it down, it does line up basically perfectly. You can see that it's on the opposite side. It is on the inside of that little lump. So I don't have to squeeze to engage this latch. I can just relax my hand, push it down, and close it in, and it latches closed. And so I really do enjoy this latch as far as functionality in the open and the closed position, because if I want to use this knife, I want to do anything hard with it. I've never done it, but you know, it's very quick, it's very intuitive, and it's very easy to use in that aspect, but it doesn't come out that easy. It is a little bit stiff. The tang pins haven't moved. They weren't Loctited from the factory. I did do that myself, and they haven't moved. They've been solid. You can see the wear on the actual tang cups themselves here. This will come back into focus for me. There is a little bit of wear there. It's definitely, you know, beating that finish away, but it's not beating into the titanium. You know what I mean? There's no deformation opposed from the actual finish itself, so that's really good. And it's the same thing on the tang pins themselves. The finish, that bead blast finish on the tang pins is gone, but you can see that there's no actual deformation. So it's holding up quite well, and I have flipped this thing quite a bit. I'm not the craziest flipper, so it hasn't taken a whole lot of abuse in that fashion, but I've dropped this thing on the floor multiple times. I've beat this thing up, so it has taken a beating in that sense. And so I've definitely got the confidence in it there. But one thing I'm just not a fan of as well, if you saw my first video, I had mentioned that I intend on retipping this knife. And I've dropped on the floor a couple times. That's the only deformation that I've actually got to the tip right there, but there's a problem with that. Because if I'm going to resharpen this knife, or actually retip this knife, I've got two options. I can come down the spine and actually grind down the spine to re-meet that cutting edge, right? But it's rounded, it's got that nice crown on it, it's got that stone wash finish. I'm not going to remove that. You know what I mean? I'm not going to mess with the crown of this knife. So my only option is to grind the blade, right? And if I'm going to remove that chip because of this straight edge, the way this Wharncliffe is done, I'm going to have to take that edge all the way back up to that section there. You know what I mean? So I'm going to have to remove, like, I mean, there's probably a 62nd or a 64th of an inch of material back off the edge to retip this knife. That's why I haven't done it. I'm not going to retip this knife, because if I did, I would be losing so much of the blade every time I retip this knife that it's just not worth it. And so fixing the deformation that's going to be caused from dropping this on the floor, or, you know, just beating up on that tip, is not easy to do. It's going to be, it's not a good design for abuse. This is not a good blade shape to be worked on. It's not a very good blade shape to be used hard and then resharpened. The flat edge is definitely going to be easy to sharpen, and it comes down very thin behind the actual edge. Came razor sharp out of the box. I don't know, let me see if it'll actually still. And you can see that there. I mean, so it's still hair shaving sharp, and I've cut a little bit with it, more myself than anything else, but I just don't think. Yeah, it's very thin, very nice, very sharp, very clean edge. It is going to be easy to sharpen, but not to retip. So I just don't. That's my biggest gripe with the blade. As far as the aesthetics go, I love it, right? I mean, it's just, I'm going to stick with the word I used in the beginning is primal. And it just, I mean, it's been compared to a straight razor. It's been, it looks like an orc sword to me. I really like it. The bumps, I don't notice. I never notice these lumps in flipping until I'm doing a twirl. If I'm doing something like a full twirl, right, then I actually do notice where those little bumps are, because my finger enclosed like this, you know what I mean? And that's where I'm doing all of the manipulation when I'm doing something like that. And when I'm doing a twirl, coming around like that, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, go like this. Hey, I can actually do it in here. Right, and that's the only time that I actually notice my fingers in this mechanism, or the bumps actually coming into play. And they're inhibiting then. The only time I actually notice them, I don't like them, because it just makes it harder to actually get that flipping around. Because when I'm on the square section, it's fine, you can see there. But if I come back and I actually manage to get onto this rounded section, when I squeeze, it naturally wants to do that, because I'm compressing at an angle, right? My fingers they're connected down here, and it's widening out, right? So when I squeeze them together, there is that inherent bend, and it wants to flip sideways. And so it has actually, it's gotten away from me a couple times when I'm doing a twirl. But that's the only time that I've actually ever noticed these. But unless I'm thinking about it, you know what I mean? If I'm thinking about them, then they're obvious, because I can feel them inherently just right now. I mean, I can feel them when I'm actually flipping the knife, but so that's, again, it's a positive and a negative. And I do think that, again, they were trying to go for the best of both worlds with that. Because if you notice, it's in this section here, it's squared, and it definitely feels like that. It feels more squared off,
And I can do the same manipulations, but much more like this 51. It actually reminds me a lot of the way that the 51 is shaped. You know, that square with the dip in the center? It's the same thing here. But when I come back onto this section here, it reminds me a lot more, honestly, of the 63, because I've got that hole and then it's rounded off. You can see this profile here. And so it's wider. It's definitely wider in this direction than the 63. And so it's just got that multi-feeling in my hand, you know? And I think if I was good enough actually to use that to my advantage, I could do some crazy things with that. Some people are probably going to be able to do some really crazy things with this knife because of that. I love the way that the holes taper. I didn't actually notice that in my first impressions video. It took me a long time to realize that the holes here, you can notice the holes up here, they taper in size. You can see that down the handle. So it gives a little bit more weight in the actual back of the handle. Because in this section here, this hole is a little bit smaller. And so there's actually more weight here than this section here. And so it's definitely planned out. This handle, I think, has got a lot of planning and intricate thought that actually went into it, and so I definitely respect that. As you know, Benchmade is a company, but the inside of these, let me see if I can actually get a shot in here. I don't know if you can see the inside of this handle here. There we go. Is marred up all the way down here. That's beat up. And the other side here, you can see the little bit of a shiny spot. And it has marred up the inside of the finish as well. That's just from the blade actually coming into contact and making contact in the actual frame itself there. And that's just because it's not quite tight enough. When I Loctited it, I didn't get them quite tight enough, and so it backed out fractionally. I mean, just fractionally. It's not enough to actually give me any blade play. There's still basically no blade play or handle play in there, but it was just enough to actually cause that, you know what I mean, that little bit of shimmer. So I love the way that these tang pins are done. They just look so good. Snap closed. Give you a size comparison. Latch worked good for me there. This knife is freaking huge. You can see it up next to a 51. It's wider in profile. It's actually about the same in thickness. Coming down. 63. Big old handles. 4.5-inch handles. No, it's 5-inch handles, I think. I want to say 5.5-inch handles. 4.5-inch blade. It's a B200, Bear Ops B200. It's the same size as that Bear Ops there, and this Microtech Tachyon 3 is just a fraction longer. You can see that there. Throw it up next to some other knives. Benchmade 51 dwarfs it. Spyderco Delica 4. Yep. The sheath, again, I had a thought about this sheath. It's probably great, honestly really good for a flipper, because if I carry a fixed blade a lot, right? And when you're using it over and over and over and over again, you getting a snap and removing, undoing that button and then undoing, a really heavy detent or something like that on a fixed blade out of its sheath is annoying, because you have to do it over and over and over again. You use the knife for 2 seconds, put it back in the sheath, and it takes you a whole another 2 seconds to get the knife out of your sheath. It's ridiculous, right? And so this sheath here, the way that it actually just fits in there, you can just jam it in, keep going, la-da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh, I'm going to flip again, pull your knife out, la-da-da-da, flip, up, I'm done, people, whatever, you're going to put your knife away. So I imagine in that aspect, this knife is excellent. For like a flipper that's going to be carrying this all of the time, this is probably going to work really well, because it does have that aspect to it. But at the same time, it's just a single piece of fabric with some things stitched on it that aren't even stitched on straight. You can see that there. It's this section here isn't even stitched on straight. Little Velcro straps to the actual mounting mechanism. It's intended that you make little belt loops with this, and actually strap it again. This is a very modular system. You can do what you want with it. You can create any sort of belt loops, carry it horizontally, vertically. You can do what you want, but it's just little strips of Velcro coming with a $600 knife. It's a $510 knife on the street, and they give you this little pouch with it. I don't quite like this, but it does fit in the standard 63 pouch. Not fully. You can see there's still a little bit of Velcro exposed there, but it does fit into the sheath. So if I was going to be carrying this, which I have a couple times, but it's, see that? That latch is messing with me. I was trying to open it, couldn't do it. This is my intent. This is my preferred method to carry. So it does still fit in the old Benchmade pouch, but I can see that sheath having some good things about it. And at the same time, I'm just not a very big fan. That's the Benchmade 87 balisong. Y'all have a good one.